Gittin Daf Mem Dalid continues Gemara's discussion about the halacha. And if somebody sells his Eved Kinani, who has a partial halacha of Yisrael, if he sells him to an Oved Kichavim, he goes free, and it is a knas that the Rabbanon penalized the Yisrael for selling his Eved Kinani, because he sells him to Oved Kichavim, he will not be able to keep mitzvahs properly there, and he is chayiv in certain mitzvahs. Or to prevent people from selling their avadim to Oved Kichavim, we knas them that they will go free and they can never return. So Gemara has a number of questions, proofs on the topic. So Gemara begins with the Brisa. So the Brisa says that there is a situation in which he does not go free, the knas does not apply, and that's if the Yisrael didn't have a choice in the matter. So if the Oved Kichavim collected the Eved from him as a repayment for a chayv that he had, meaning he owed something to the Oved Kichavim, and the Eved, he did not make the Eved his mashkan, then he would lose the Eved. He did not make the Eved from where the guy should collect. However, he came and he grabbed the Eved, the Oved Kichavim grabbed the Eved as repayment for this loan. Or if he was taken away by Sikrikin were tough guys who used to threaten to kill people, and they had the right to in certain environments, and sometimes the only way to appease them was to bribe them, so he bribed them by giving him his Eved. So in either of these two situations, the Yisrael didn't have a choice in the matter. He was forced to give him over, and therefore there's no knas, and he doesn't go free. So if he ever finds his way back, if the Eved ever finds his way free, then he goes back to serving the Yisrael who owned him before. Now, the Gemara is the kasha. He's saying that he collects him for a chayv that he owed. He does not go free. He's considered to be an einus. Well, I'll prove to you that if you lose property, you're not considered to be an einus if it's for a obligation that you owed, because you would have had to pay something else. So you're gaining from it. So we have a brisa that discusses if a king takes away somebody's granary. The question is, will the person have to pay meiser for what he did? That's meiser ksafim. So it says if the king took it away as repayment of an obligation that he had to the king, so then he has to pay meiser because he's gaining that obligation, that amount that he owed. He doesn't owe any longer. That's a monetary gain. He has to take meiser. If, however, he took it away as anparois, that's just, it was a loss. He grabbed it from him, so then there isn't anything that he needs to pay. So Gemara says, so you see that it's not considered to be an einus, it's considered to be a profit, and he has to pay the meiser for it. So Gemara says, no, that's very different. Meiser is not the same rules as knas of the sale of an Eved. The sale of an Eved, the Rabbanan only knast you if you should not have done that. Here you didn't have a choice in the matter. However, if there was a obligation that you owed and now you don't own it anymore, so then there's a gain. So you definitely gain financially, so you have to pay meiser. They're two very different halachas and are not related. Okay, now the Gemara says they have another proof on the subject. The Gemara quotes Rav, who says that somebody sells his Eved to a parhang of Oved Kichavim, he goes free. Parhang, Rashi explains, was another kind of tough guy who would make false claims against somebody, or Yisrael. He would make accusations, claims, he would make trouble for him, and the only way to get rid of the guy was to give him something. So if he gave him his Eved to get rid of this parhang, so Rav says he goes free. He does go free. So you see that you do go free in a situation like that. So the Gemara says, no, Rav's talking about where you had a different way out of it. You could have appeased, you could have gotten rid of this parhang by giving him something else, and you didn't. And therefore you're held accountable, and there is a knas for the fact that you gave the Eved into the ownership of this Oved Kichavim. Now, the Gemara has more to say on this parhang. The Gemara quotes Rav again, the same thing. Somebody gives his Eved to the parhang, he goes free because he could have appeased him with something else. And it says this should help us resolve a question that was asked by Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, what if somebody sells his Eved to the king for 30 days? What is the halacha there? Is that considered to be that he should go free or not? Was that included in the knas? So when it says the case of Rav with the parhang, the simplest understanding is that he gave it him for a short time. He just gave him like on loan for 30 days or something, that he should temporarily serve this parhang. So you still see that he goes free. So obviously the fact that it's temporary does not change the knas. He still goes free. So says, no, we're not talking about where it was temporary here. We're talking about where he gave it permanently to somebody who grabs him permanent. Okay, the Gemara has more questions about this knas. The Gemara has a list here. So the Gemara says, what will be if you sold regularly without a parhang, without any being forced, you sold an Evet to an Evet Kechavim, but you sold him with the exception of work. So Rashi's two explanations there. Either means you sold him not to work, just to sire children, or you sent him that he won't have to work on Shabbos and Yom Tov, so he'll be able to keep the full halachas. Or if you sent him that he cannot, you sold him with the rule that he cannot make him violate any of his mitzvahs, or that he can't work Shabbos and can't work Yom Tov, or if you sold him to a ger toishav, who is somewhat status of Yisrael. Ger toishav is someone who still does all halachos like an Evet Kechavim, but he doesn't serve Avodah Zarah. Or you sell him to Yisrael Mumar, that's Yisrael who doesn't keep, he's technically Yisrael, but he doesn't keep any of the halachos. You sell him to a Kusi. What's the halacha in all these situations? So the Gemara says we could solve one. The Ger Taishav we know has the halacha status of an Evet Kechavim as for all things. As far as the Kusi and Yisrael Mumar, so they might be considered to be Evet Kechavim Midrabanan. Some say they're considered to be Evet Kechavim, and some say they're not. The Gemara now moves on to its next sugya. Also in the halachos of selling an Evet Kechavim, the Gemara says the question was asked to Rabbi Ami. If an Evet gives himself over to captors, he runs away and allows himself to be captured by robbers, by bandits, and his master cannot get him away from them. He cannot take them to a Jewish court. He cannot take them to a non-Jewish court. Either way, he's going to lose. So there's no way to free them. So the question then is, if he can't get the Evet back legally, can he at least take payment? Can he demand money for them? Let's say he wouldn't be able to get the Evet back, but he could get money for it. Can he get money, or is that like he's completing a sale of the Evet, and one is not allowed to sell an Evet to an Evet Kechavim? So Umar says, Rav Yirmiyah addressed Rav Zrika, and he said, I'd like you to look into this Shaila, look into your Mishnayos and see if you find an answer. So he looked and he found a very similar thing, except instead of talking about an Evet, it's talking about a house. It says that somebody who sells his house to an Evet Kechavim, the money is forbidden. You can't use the money. It's a Gzeres Chazal. You shouldn't sell your homes in Eretz Yisrael to Evet Kechavim in order to keep them for Yisrael. However, if an Evet Kechavim grabs away somebody's house, and the owner of the house cannot get it away from him, not in Jewish court, not in a court of Evet Kechavim, then it is permitted for him to take money for it. Not only that, he's allowed to go to a non-Jewish court, write a contract, and get the money that way, even though generally one is not allowed to go to a non-Jewish court. And the reason is because you're just saving your money from the hands of the Akum. At least you should get some money away from the Akum. He took away your property. Why should property fall into their possession? Get value for it. So therefore, if you're allowed to get money for your house, even though you're not allowed to sell your house to an Evet Kechavim, you should be allowed to get money for your Evet, even though you're not allowed to sell an Evet to an Evet Kechavim. So Gemara wants to say maybe it's different. Maybe a house, we don't have to worry that if we allow you to do this, you're going to end up selling a house to an Evet Kechavim straight out in Gzeira. The reason is because people don't usually sell their homes. They need to live in their homes. However, an Evet you could do without. So if people see that this is a way that you can get money for your Evet, maybe somebody's going to do this on purpose. He's going to go sell his Evet to an Akam in this manner. So maybe we won't allow it. Someone says the Rav Ami paskined, however, that you could learn from here. And Rav Ami sent a message back to those who asked, and he said, this halacha goes for me, Ami Bar Nasan, for all of Yisrael. The halacha is that if an Evet gives himself over to captors, and his master can't get him away b'dinei Yisrael, not b'dinei Kechavim, then it's permitted for him to take money for it, and he's allowed to go to court, and he's allowed to get a contract because he's saving money from the hands of the Akum. Gemara now brings another halacha of somebody who sells an Evet to Evet Kechavim. The Gemara says he's obligated to buy him back. Not only does the Evet go free, but he has to buy the freedom of the Evet from the person he sold him to. It says Rishul ben Levi has to buy him back, and here we have two versions. Then into the first version, he said up to 100 times the value. So when I asked 100 times the value, is that a wild exaggeration? Would just mean to say you have to pay a lot, but not actually you have to multiply the value of the Evet on the market by 100, and that's his limit? Or do we mean, no, that is actually how much he has to spend? So Gemara says, wants to bring a proof from a statement of Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says that somebody sells a large animal to an Evet Kechavim, we penalize him, and he has to pay up to 10 times the value to buy it back. Now, the reason you're not allowed to sell a large animal to an Evet Kechavim is because a work animal if you would own it and you would lend it or rent it to an Eved Kechavim, he would work your animal on Shabbos, which is an Isser. In order to prevent that from happening, Chazal made Gzer, you're not allowed to rent or sell your animal to an Eved Kechavim, a work animal that is, not only you're not allowed to rent or lend it, you're also not allowed to sell it. Because there you may end up renting, selling, or giving him as a trial. So that's forbidden. And Rosh Hashanah says if you do it, you have to pay up to 10 times the value to get the animal back. So you see, we don't really make knesses as high as 100 times the value. 10 times the value is the standard. And therefore, when it says 100 times, it's probably just an exaggeration. And it means you have to spend a lot. So and then the Gemara wants to reject this. The Gemara says, no, it could be that an Eved, we want you to spend much worse. Because an Eved, every day he's living in the house of the guy, he's losing mitzvahs. The behema is just on Shabbos. Okay, the behema, they'll use your animal for Chol Shabbos here and there. But it's not even, because it's only a Gzeira, and it doesn't even belong to you once it's actually sold. There is no Isser. But the Eved, he's literally being machalo mitzvahs and all kinds of halachos every day. So maybe we can ask you much more. Now, the other version of this is that Yeshua ben Levi actually said 10 times the value. He didn't say 100 times the value. And the Gemara again asks, is that specific, or do you sometimes even have to pay more? The Gemara quotes Rish Lakish, and in this version, Rish Lakish said you have to pay for the animal 100 times as much. So the Gemara says, you see, you have to pay much more than just 10 times as much. Gemara wants to reject it. Gemara wants to say, no, maybe the reason why you have to pay more for the animal is because you get to keep the animal after you buy it back. The Eved, you don't get to keep after you buy it back, because like we said, it goes free. So Gemara said, but that wouldn't make sense why there should be a difference of 90 times the value. That's the difference of 1 time the value. You get to keep it, so you get 1 more. Okay, so you should have to pay up to 11 times the value. But 100 times the value doesn't make any sense. So the Gemara therefore says that selling an Eved is milsa de shchicha. It's uncommon. We don't make zeros or banan in milsa de shchicha, so we don't have these rules. That's why we just gave a general phrase. The Gemara has another question on this topic. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Asi, somebody sells his Eved, and then the person, the one who sold it, he dies. So he's not around anymore that we could force him to buy the Eved back. Do we now force his inheritors, the children, to buy the Eved back? Can you pass on this knas to the children? So Gemara wants to try to prove it from the halacha of a bechor. If a kohen has a bechor that was given to him, and he makes a mum in the bechor, he nicks its ear because he doesn't want it to be used as a carbon. So he violates an Isser D'Oraisa of making a mum in a carbon, and he has a knas that he's not allowed to use it for his own purposes, even though a bechor that has a mum should be mutter to shecht, but here, since he made the mum on purpose, he's penalized and he can't use it at all at any point in the future. And we discussed, does he pass that knas on to his children? And the halacha is yes, he does. So we should learn from here also, we pass along the knas that he has to redeem the Eved. Where says that's different. That was an Isser D'Oraisa he violated. Here it's just a Gzeir D'Rabbanan. Maybe you can't learn from there. Now, the Gemara links this question to another knas of Chazal. The halacha is that one is not allowed to do work, construction, all kinds of activities on Chol Moed. However, if they already began and they would cause a loss, if he can't finish them on Chol Moed, then he's allowed to. Now, if somebody specifically tries to fool the system and he tries to specifically start a project close to Chol Moed so that it'll be a loss for him, if he were to leave it on Chol Moed, so he's trying to use this halacha to allow himself to work in Chol Moed, we can ask him, and he's not allowed to do the work in Chol Moed, and he'll end up having to suffer the loss. And there we had a shaila, if he dies, can his kids finish the work in Chol Moed because they didn't do anything? So the Gemara doesn't resolve that, but the Gemara wants to say, if we do knas him there, if we do knas the children there, he didn't violate any Isser, he didn't do anything wrong. All he did was start a project close to Yontif. So if we knas him without doing anything wrong, in our case, we should certainly knas him. However, if we don't knas the kids there, so we could still ask a question, in our case, do you knas him? And the Gemara phrases it now as, is the knas on the person or is the knas on the money? Is the estate obligated by Gzeres Chazal to redeem the Eved that was once part of it, or is it on the person and the person is gone and doesn't go over to his children? So the Gemara says that he answered, he had an answer to this, and he brought 2 proofs that you don't knas the children. First proof is from somebody who worked his field on Shemitah. So there's a knas that he's not allowed to work it after Shemitah if he did some sort of not literal work, which is an Isser Daraisa, but he kind of improved it during Shemitah in a mutter way, but there's a knas or a banan he's not allowed to work on after Shemitah. So the Brisa there says, if all he did was clear out weeds and make it look nice, so there's no knas after Shemitah. If, however, he fertilized it, either by trucking in fertilizer or by letting animals walk around there, then there is a knas and he cannot do it after Shemitah. But we said there, Rav Yosef says that if he did it and then he dies, his child is allowed to plant it after Shemitah. We don't knas him. Another proof comes from Abaye. This is talking about somebody who was metame someone else's taharis. Now, if you metame somebody's things, now you can't use it. It's what's called hezek she'ein nicker. You ruined it, but there's no visible change. So hezek she'ein nicker deraisa is not called hezek, and you don't have to pay deraisa. There is no real halachic obligation. However, there is a knas derabanan that you have to pay for it. And again, we learned there that knas does not pass on to one's child. So here also the same halacha could apply. This knas will not pass on to the child. The Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah where we saw the next halacha that you're not allowed to sell an eved to someone who lives outside Eretz Yisrael, someone who lives in Chutz La'aretz. So the Gemara is going to discuss this now. So the Gemara brings a brisa, and the brisa says that someone who sells his eved to Chutz La'aretz, even to a Jew, goes free because he cannot force the eved to leave Eretz Yisrael, and he does still require get shichur. You have to take his status of eved off. Not only does he go free, but you also have to take his Isser Eved off, and you have to give him a get shechur. The second master has to give him the get shechur. Now, Rav Shimon Gamliel disagrees. Rav Shimon Gamliel says sometimes he goes free, sometimes he doesn't go free, and it depends if he sold it to a foreigner who lives there or he doesn't live there. And there's three levels. It could be a foreigner who lives in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara refers to an Antuchi, somebody who lives in Antioch. So it could be an Antuchi in Antioch, or it could be one level below that in Antuchi generally. You just sold it to an Antuchi, nothing to do with where he lives. He doesn't have any permanent residence that you're aware of. Or you sold it to an Antuchi who lives in Eretz Yisrael. He's still an Antuchi though, so he might go back to Antioch. So Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, so we have a steer here. What Rav Shimon ben Gamliel holds exactly. In our version, he said that if he sold him to an Antuchi, generally, the middle case, he doesn't go free. He only goes free on the highest level. If it's an Antuchi in Antioch, that his permanent dwelling is outside Eretz Yisrael. So when I ask, we have a brisa that says not that. We have a brisa that says an Antuchi generally does go free. The only one that does not go free is if the Antuchi is the third level, the Antuchi who lives in Eretz Yisrael. So you have a contradiction about the middle case. According to our version, he does not go free, and according to the Bryce's version, he goes free. The Gemara says it's not a kasha. Question is, what kind of residence does he own in Eretz Yisrael? If you're just generally an Antuchi and he's here, you don't know about any permanent residence in Antioch. What does he have here? If he lives in a permanent, he bought a house here, so then you could assume he's going to stay here, and the Eved wouldn't go free. Even if he takes him back with him to Antioch, it's not your fault. You were allowed to assume that he's going to live here. If, however, he just has like a hotel room, so then you have to assume he's going to go back, and you're not allowed to sell to him. Okay, the Gemara now has another child. What happens if a man from Chutz La'aretz, let's say from Bavel, the Gemara says, marries a woman in Eretz Yisrael, and the woman brings into the marriage property, and some of this property is avadim. Now, we have a general rule that a husband takes control of the property his wife brings into the marriage. She maintains ownership, but he has use of it. And as far as certain halachas, he's considered to be a purchaser. Rashi brings this in. It's like he bought it as far as Hilchos Shibudim. If somebody else wants to take them away from her, he's considered to be a purchaser. So the question is this look like the woman sold her avadim to her husband? If the husband now wants to go back to Chutz La'aretz, now you have a problem that she sold her eved and the eved should go free, or not. So the Gemara says, well, we have to look at two sides of another question. The question is, when a woman brings property into the marriage and then they get divorced, and then they're arguing over how he gives it back to her. So he may say, I'm going to give you back just the money. And she says, no, I want the actual things. So there's a machlekes, who wins? If he wins and he can give her the money, or if she wins and she can insist on the actual property.